Okay, getting everything set up and ready to go. Doing my sound check first. Sorry that I'm running late today, guys, but I am here. Better to show up late rather than not showing up at all. So I'm gonna do a sound. Sounds good on YouTube. Getting the playlist set up as usual with a thumbnail. If I can do this properly. And then after that, I will do sound checks on everything else. Today's going to be another episode of Weird Science. So, get got the talking notes all set up and ready to go. I just have to get it going now. So, let me get that set. Oh, wait, that's the wrong thumbnail. I don't know what I was thinking. Got to set that up on a different one. Sorry about that. I have different thumbnails that I've been using for Weird Science so that I can have it all or show off some of the stuff I've been doing with audio visualization in Blender. So it sounds good on Kick. So I think it sounds good on D Live. And now I'm going to go to Twitch. Check that out. And after that, I will do the show. Sounds good on Twitch. So we are up and ready to go. Seems like everything is going good. Usually I don't do D Live. I don't keep it open. Um, okay, so it sounds good on Rumble as well. Let me go ahead and see what's going on here. Okay. Now I'm gonna let everybody know. Whenever I'm reading, I have a hard time getting into the chat. So if anybody wants to make comments, go ahead and make comments during the show, and I will get to your comments after I'm done doing my topics. Just want to let everybody know that I had somebody make a comment earlier about that, and I wanted to make sure that everybody's aware. I will answer questions in the chat during, but not during the reading. So, if you guys do have any comments that you'd like to make, feel free to make them. It'll just take me a little while to do them. I usually do three topics, and after the topics are all done and read, then I'll go through and I'll check the comments and everything because I do edit these down into smaller sections and then post them back up as edited versions of the live stream. Now, besides these streams being on the Wonderful World of Weirdness on YouTube, I also put a copy of the raw video, or no, it's the edited videos on my other channel that I had before I got involved with the Wonderful World of Weirdness, and that channel is called Strange Stories. You guys can find that on YouTube. If you can't find it on YouTube, mention it in the chat or the comment section, whichever one, and I will send you in that direction. They come out there too, so there's plenty of opportunities to see or hear some of the stuff that I'm bringing up. So with that being said, let me go ahead and I just took my drink of coffee, and now let me go ahead and get into the the stream or the topics. So here we go. Hypatia of Alexandria remains one of the most captivating figures of the late ancient world. She was a philosopher, mathematician, and astronomer who lived in Alexandria during the 4th and early 5th century of the Common Era. Her reputation as a brilliant teacher and thinker was matched only by the tragic circumstances of her death, which is echoed through history as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. Her life illustrates the fragile balance between reason and faith, knowledge and superstition, tolerance and fanaticism. In a period of cultural transformation. In telling her story, we will also trace the broader struggle of humanity to preserve knowledge in times of upheaval and to honor those who dedicated their lives to truth and wisdom. Hypatia was born into a city that had once been the unrivaled intellectual capital of the Mediterranean world. Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great centuries earlier, had long been home to the great library and museum, institutions that symbolized the pinnacle of Greek learning. Although by Hypatia's lifetime the library was diminished, the tradition of scholarship still survived in schools of philosophy, science, and literature. The city was also crossroads of cultures, religions, and commerce, with Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, Jews, and increasingly Christians living side by side, not always peaceful. The intellectual climate of Alexandria was therefore both rich and dangerous, full of ideas, but also conflicts. Her father, Theon of Alexandria, was himself a man of learning. He is remembered as an editor and a commentator of classic texts, including works of Euclid and Ptolemy. Through him, Hypatia was introduced at a young age to the rigorous study of mathematics and astronomy. Unlike most women of the era, whose education was restricted to domestic or religious instruction, Hypatia was trained as if she were a son, destined for scholarly pursuit. Theon recognized her remarkable intellect and gave her not only the tools of learning but also the encouragement to pursue knowledge freely. This foundation allowed Hypatia to emerge as one of the very few female philosophers and scientists whose names have survived from antiquity. Hypatia did not merely inherit her father's knowledge, but quickly surpassed it. She became a prominent teacher of philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy, leading a school of Neoplatonism in Alexandria. Neoplatonism was a philosophical movement that built on the ideas of Plato, but sought to systematize them into a vision of the universe in which all things emanated from a single divine principle known as the One. For Neoplatonists, philosophy was not just abstract speculation, but also a spiritual path, guiding the soul back towards unity with the divine. Mathematics, with its clarity and order, was viewed as a key to understanding the structure of the cosmos, and thus approaching the One. Hypatia's ability to integrate mathematics, philosophy, and astronomy made her one of the most respected voices in this tradition. According to her students and admirers, they described her as a remarkable lecturer. She is said to have won the philosopher's cloak and to have walked openly in the city, something unusual for a woman of her time. She taught not only in formal settings, but also in public, explaining complex ideas to audiences of diverse backgrounds. She had students from across the Mediterranean, some pagans, some Christians, and some who later went on to hold high offices. One of the most famous was Synesius of Cyrene, who became a Christian bishop but never ceased to revere his teacher. His surviving letters to Hypatia speaks of her wisdom, her guidance, and the deep respect she inspired. These letters also confirm that she contributed to scientific work, including the design of astrolabes and hydrometers, instruments used to study the heavens and measure the properties of liquids. Hypatia's role as a teacher was as important as her intellectual contributions. She represented a living link to the classic heritage of Greece, transmitting knowledge that otherwise might have been lost. She worked on the preservation and editing of mathematical texts, including the writings of Apollonius on conic sections and the arithmetical treatise of Diophantus. Excuse me. While her own writings have not survived in complete form, her influence can be traced through these preserved works and through the testimony of her contemporaries. It is very likely that her commentaries helped make difficult texts more accessible to later generations, ensuring their survival into the medieval period when they were translated into Arabic and then into Latin. Yet Hypatia lived at a time when the intellectual world was being overshadowed by political and religious strife. The Roman Empire had officially embraced Christianity, and in Alexandria, the growing power of the Christian bishopric bishopric often clashed with the civic authority of Roman officials. Religious tensions between Christians, Jews, and pagans frequently erupted into riots and violence. Hypatia, though not a Christian, managed for a time to maintain respect among Christian elites, showing her ability to rise above sectarian divides. Her presence as a female philosopher and scientist teaching openly in a divided city was extraordinary and precarious. The fragile balance eventually collapsed. Hypatia became associated with Orestes, Roman prefect of Alexandria, who was engaged in a bitter power struggle with Cyril, the bishop of the city. Many of Cyril's power struggle, no, many in Cyril's faction accused Hypatia of influencing Orestes against the church. In an atmosphere where rumors and suspicion quickly turned into violence, such accusations were dangerous. Hypatia's reputation as a pagan philosopher made her an easy target for zealots, who saw her as a symbol of the old order that Christianity was displacing. In the year 415, during Lent, Hypatia was ambushed by a mob of Christian extremists known as the Parabolani. They dragged her from her chariot into a church and brutally murdered her. Accounts differ in detail, but the consensus is that her death was extraordinarily violent. Her body was torn apart and her remains burned. The shocking act reverberated across the empire. Even some Christians were horrified, recognizing that the killing of a respected philosopher had brought shame upon the church. For others, however, her death symbolized the triumph of Christianity, or Christian authority, over pagan learning. The murder of Hypatia has been remembered ever since as a turning point, often portrayed as the end of the classical age of reason and the beginning of a darker time. While this vision is somewhat oversimplified, it captures the scene of loss that her death represented. The image of Hypatia as the last great philosopher of Alexandria has endured in the cultural memory, paired with the image of the great library's destruction. Whether or not the events were directly connected, both serve as metaphors for the fragility of knowledge in the face of violence and intolerance. In later centuries, Hypatia became more than a historical figure, she became a symbol. During the Renaissance, when interest in classical antiquity was revived, scholars began to write about her as a guardian of Greek learning. Enlightenment thinkers such as Voltaire held her up as a martyr of science and reason against religious fanaticism. In the 19th century, she was romanticized in novels and paintings, often depicted as a tragic heroine pure and noble, destroyed by ignorance. These portrayals were sometimes more myth than history, but they kept her memory alive. In the modern era, historians have tried to separate the real Hypatia from the layers of legend. They emphasize her role as a mathematician and philosopher in her own right, not merely a victim. She represents the persistence of women in intellectual life despite, despite, hold up, okay, I got confused there. She represents the persistence of women in intellectual life despite the odds, as well as the enduring value of reason in a world often dominated by politics and dogma. Her name has been invoked and discussed about science, secularism, and the right of women, showing her story continues to resonate far beyond her own time. Hypatia's story also challenges us to reflect on the relationship between knowledge and power. She was killed not because of her crime, but because she represented independence of thought in a world where authority was increasingly concentrated in the church. Her death reveals how fragile intellectual freedom can be when it conflicts with political or religious agendas. At the same time, the survival of her memory shows that ideas cannot be extinguished so easily. Though her life was cut short, her influence endures precisely because later generations have looked back to her as a symbol of what was lost and what must always be defended. Her role as a teacher is perhaps her most lasting contribution. Even though her own work may not have survived, the ideas she imparted lives on through her students. Synesius, for instance, preserved aspects of her teaching in his letters and writings, blending Neoplatonism with his Christian faith. This fusion shows how Hypatia's influence extended even into the intellectual life of the Church, despite the hostility of some factions. The instruments she helped design, such as the astrolabe, continued to be developed and used in astronomy throughout the medieval world. In this way, she contributed indirectly to the chain of scientific knowledge that eventually reached the Renaissance and beyond. Hypatia's life also illustrates the role of women in intellectual history, a role often minimized or forgotten. She was not the first woman philosopher. Figures like Diotima or Mantinea, mentioned in Plato's dialogues, or Arete of Cyrene, had preceded her, but she was the most prominent in late antiquity. Her ability to lead a school in philosophy and to command respect in a patriarchal society was extraordinary. Her tragic fate, however, underscores how precarious such positions were. The violence she suffered reveals the limits of tolerance in her society and no, in her society and the risks faced by those who stepped outside prescribed rules. Today, Hypatia continues to inspire not only scholars but also artists, writers, and filmmakers. Her story has been retold in novels, plays, and films, often highlighting the tension between knowledge and superstition. While these retellings sometimes dramatizes or embellish her life, they reflect the continuing relevance of her story. She embodies the struggle of a world where such pursuits can provoke deadly opposition. Petrus Peregrinus de Mericourt, also known simply as Peter of Mericourt or Peter the Pilgrim, was a scholar of the 13th century whose curiosity and experiments with magnets placed him among the earliest figures to approach natural philosophy in a truly scientific manner. His surviving work, the Epistola de Magnete, or Letter of the Magnet, written in the year 1269, remains one of the oldest systematic treatises devoted to experimental science in Europe. Although only a relative short letter, it has an outsized importance because it demonstrates how the careful observation of natural phenomena, combined with structured experimentation, could uncover patterns and laws that were both predictable and universal. At a time when most scholars were still heavily influenced by the writings of Aristotle or by mystical traditions that sought symbolic explanations for natural forces, Peregrinus offered a bold step towards the modern scientific method. Very little is known about his personal life, which adds a layer of mystery to his achievements. He is thought to have been French, likely born in Picardy, and may have served in the military during the time of the Crusades. The name Peregrinus, meaning pilgrim, suggests that he may have undertaken long journeys, perhaps religious pilgrims or travels associated with his role in military campaigns. His treatise, or his treatise, was written in the form of a letter addressed to a fellow scholar, indicating that he was connected to a network of intellectuals and experimenters of his day. This hints that he was not a lone thinker, but part of a broader intellectual movement that was beginning to look at the natural world with fresh eyes. The Letter of the Magnet begins with a description of the lodestone, a naturally magnetized piece of iron ore that had fascinated human cultures for centuries. In antiquity, the Greeks and the Chinese both described the curious properties of the lodestone. By the time of Peregrinus, it was already known among sailors that a magnetic needle could be used for navigation, since it consistently pointed in a particular direction. What set Peregrinus apart, however, was his determination to study the lodestone directly, to test it systematically and to report his findings in a structural and logical way. He fashioned a lodestone into the shape of a sphere, an object later called a terrella, and used it to explore how magnetism behaved across its surface. Through these experiments, Peregrinus identified the existence of two opposing poles, which he described as points of attraction and repulsion. He noticed that no matter how the lodestone was cut or divided, each fragment formed its own set of poles. These observations foreshadowed what scientists would later understand as the impossibilities of isolating a magnetic monopole in ordinary matter. The idea that the poles could not be separated into isolated north and south units was a profound step forward, revealing that magnetism was not a property or individual points, but of the entire structure of the material. Peregrinus also carefully documented how like poles repelled each other and unlike poles attracted. He used iron fillings sprinkled on the surface of his terrella to trace out the invisible lines of force that seemed to stretch between poles. Although he could not see the underlying physics, he had stumbled upon the concept of magnetic field lines centuries before the idea was formalized. His description of how the fillings arranged themselves gave readers a way to visualize a hidden order underlying magnetic attraction. Beyond description, Peregrinus moved into practical application. He suggested ways that these magnetic principles could be used to create reliable navigational instruments. The compass was already known in a rough form, probably borrowed from Chinese or Arabic seafaring practices. But Peregrinus provided the first clear explanation of how it worked. He explained that a needle, once magnetized by contact with a lodestone, would align itself with the larger magnetic field of the Earth. To him, this was not just a curiosity, but a tool of immense potential, offering sailors a way to find their direction even when the stars or the sun were hidden. His account represents the first scientific treatment of the compass, and it showed how experimental knowledge could serve human needs in very practical ways. What makes Peregrinus especially notable is the way he emphasizes experiment over speculation. He did not lean on mystical theories or symbolic interpretation, but instead trusted the evidence of his senses and the repeatability of his trials. Excuse me. He described how he tested the lodestone repeatedly, rotating it, cutting it, sprinkling fillings upon it, and noting the outcomes. His voice in the treatise is remarkably modern in tone, as though he were instructing readers in how to replicate his experiments for themselves. This approach placed him far ahead of many of his contemporaries who often repeated the wisdom of earlier writers rather than testing nature directly. The letter on the magnet correlated among scholars in manuscript form and influenced later thinkers, though it was not widely known outside learned circles. Nonetheless, it became a source of inspiration for William Gilbert, the English physician and natural philosopher, whose work De Magnete, published in 1590, is often credited as the foundation of modern studies of magnetism. Gilbert cited Peregrinus and built upon his methods, expanding the experimental approach and linking magnetism to the very nature of the earth itself, which he argued functioned as a giant magnet. Without the foundation laid by Peregrinus, Gilbert's achievements would have been harder to imagine. The story of Peregrinus also illustrates the transition that was beginning to unfold in the 13th century. Medieval Europe was slowly moving out of a period where natural philosophy was primarily an intellectual commentary on classical texts and into a period where direct observation and experimentation became more central. Universities were beginning to grow in numbers. Cross-cultural contacts with the Islamic world were beginning, and new scientific ideas and individuals like Peregrinus were daring to probe natural forces, not for mystical significance, but for patterns and irregularities that could be described and applied. Some historians have suggested that Peregrinus's military background may have contributed to his practical mindset. If he had served in campaigns during the Crusades or in European conflicts, he might have seen firsthand the need for accurate navigation and practical tools. Unlike some of his monastic contemporaries, who pursued knowledge primarily from theological and philosophical or for theological or philosophical purposes, Peregrinus had a pragmatic streak. His writings suggest someone less interested in abstract debates and more concerned with how things worked and what could be done with them. The fact that Peregrinus is remembered today at all is a testament to the enduring value of his experimental method. While countless medieval writers are now obscure, his letter on the magnet still resonates because it contains the seeds of the scientific spirit: curiosity, observation, repetition, and application. Even though he lacked the mathematical tools or theoretical framework that later scientists would use, his work demonstrated that careful hands-on study could reveal truths about the natural world that were reliable and universal. When considering his place in the history of science, it is useful to see Peregrinus as part of a continuum. He was not the first to notice the strange properties of the lodestone, nor was he the last to expand upon them. Cultures in China had already been experimenting with compasses for centuries, and Islamic scholars had contributed their own observations. What made Peregrinus distinct was that he produced a coherent written account in Latin that fit into the European intellectual tradition. His method and his insistence on direct engagement with natural forces placed him on the path that would eventually lead to the scientific revolution centuries later. In reflection upon his legacy, we see a figure who bridges worlds, the mystical and the empirical, the medieval and the modern, the practical and the philosophical. His work is a reminder that science often advances not in sudden leaps, but through the patient labor of individuals who ask questions and trust the evidence of what they observe. The lodestone, a humble piece of iron ore, became under his hand a window into the invisible order of the universe, a force that would one day power engines, transmit voices across continents, and guide spacecrafts among the planets. Edmund Halley, remembered as one of the great figures of early modern science, is often most closely associated with the comet that bears his name. Yet his life and intellectual pursuits extend far beyond that single triumph, revealing a man of wide curiosity, bold speculation, and deep dedication to scientific exploration. To understand Halley is to place him within the vibrant atmosphere of 17th and 18th century Europe, when science was moving from scattered observations to systematic reasoning, and when the boundaries between astronomy, physics, geography, and philosophy were still fluid. Halley did not only no, Halley not only identified the periodic nature of comets, but also supported Isaac Newton in publishing the Principia, conducted investigations into the magnetic field of the Earth, and even put forth one of the earliest recorded hollow Earth theories. His career provided insights into the spirit of discovery and defined his age. Edmund Halley was born in the year 1656 in the parish of Haggerston, near London, at a time when England was in the midst of political upheaval and religious turmoil. His father was a wealthy soap maker, and his family wealth provided Edmund with the means to pursue education in scientific interests. From an early age, Halley showed exceptional talent in mathematics and astronomy. He attended Saint Paul's School in London, where he first demonstrated his gifts by creating advanced instruments and making accurate observations of celestial events. Later he entered Queen's College, Oxford, where his talents attracted attention among the scientific elite. Even as a young man, Halley displayed both ambition and independence, leaving Oxford before completing a degree to travel to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. There, using the support of the East India Company, he set up an observatory to chart stars in the southern skies that had not been properly catalogued by European astronomers. The catalogue of southern stars Halley produced, published in the year 1678, established his reputation and won him election to the Royal Society. This early work demonstrated his precision as an observer and his ability to undertake projects of great scope. It also gave him the confidence to pursue other scientific matters, ranging from lunar observations to magnetic fields. Halley was not content with narrow specialization. Like many thinkers of his era, he viewed science as a vast, interconnected field, and he was eager to make contributions wherever curiosity or opportunity led him. It was during the following decades that Halley became deeply involved with the question of comets. For centuries, comets had been regarded with awe and fear. In ancient and medieval thought, they were often interpreted as omens or disaster or change. Even after the Copernican revolution had placed the sun at the center. No, even after the Copernican revolution had placed the sun at the center of the solar system, comets remained puzzling. Were they atmospheric phenomena, celestial wanderers, or something else entirely? The appearance of a bright comet in 1680 brought the question into sharper focus. Using the new mathematical tools of Isaac Newton, Halley began studying the paths of previous observed comets. Halley compared records of comets observed in the years 1531, 1607, and 1682, and he noticed their orbits were strikingly similar. He reasoned that these were not three separate comets, but one and the same comet, returning periodically around the sun. This was a daring conclusion, for the idea of a comet as a repeating visitor bound by gravitational law was not yet accepted. Halley predicted that this comet would return again after the year 1758. He did not live to see the return, as he died in 1742, but when the comet appeared exactly as predicted, it validated both Newton's theory of universal gravitation and Halley's own insight. Since then, the comet has borne his name, a fitting tribute to his bold reasoning. Yet Halley's intellectual legacy extends further. One of his more unusual and fascinating proposals was his hollow earth theory. While today it may seem like a fringe idea or pseudoscience, in Halley's time it was presented as a serious attempt to explain natural mysteries. Halley suggested that the Earth might not be a solid sphere, but rather composed of multiple concentric shells. According to his speculation, the Earth contained an outer crust, and beneath it were interior spheres, each rotating independently. He even considered the possibility that these inner spheres might be inhabited and that they had their own light sources, such as luminous atmospheres. The context for this theory came from his own observations of the magnetic field of the Earth. Mariners had long relied on compasses, but navigational records revealed that the magnetic poles did not remain fixed. Instead, the direction of magnetic north shifted gradually over time. Halley sought to explain this wandering of the magnetic field. He suggested that if the Earth consisted of nested spherical shells, each of these could carry its own magnetic field. The variation in the total magnetic field experienced on the surface could then be the result of the interaction of these inner spheres as they rotate at different rates. Halley proposed his hollow earth theory in a paper to the Royal Society in the year 1692. Although it was not widely accepted, it reflected the spirit of scientific openness and speculation in the era. In an age before seismology or modern geology, the internal structure of the Earth was almost completely unknown. Halley's theory demonstrates both his imaginative reach and his willingness to suggest bold hypotheses that could account for puzzling phenomena. It also shows how early modern thinkers did not necessarily separate science speculation from imaginative possibilities. To Halley, the hollow earth was not simply a fanciful idea but a rational attempt to grapple with observations using the best tools available to him. It is important to recognize that Halley did not view the hollow earth theory as mystical or occult. Instead, he rooted it in magnetic observations and mathematical reasoning. In fact, he even proposed that observations and mathematical he even proposed that the study of eclipses on the moon might reveal evidence of such inner spheres if they produce faint light reflections. He framed the idea as testable, not merely fanciful. In this way, Halley distinguished himself from those who later promoted hollow earth ideas in a more sensational manner. His proposal was an example of science in formation, where bold guesses and provisional models helped pave the way for more precise knowledge in the future. Halley's interest extended beyond astronomy and geology. He studied trade winds and monsoons. Excuse me. Producing one of the earliest maps that charted global wind patterns. He made contributions to actuarial science by creating mortality tables that allowed for better calculations of life insurance. He designed and tested a diving bell that allowed extended underwater explanation. His versatility earned him a place among great polymaths of his time, comparable in breadth of interest to figures like Robert Hooke. Perhaps one of Halley's most enduring contributions to science was his role in supporting Isaac Newton. In the 1680s, Newton had developed profound mathematical insights into motion and gravity, but he was hesitant to publish them. Halley visited Newton, encouraged him, and persuaded him to bring his work into print. Not only did Halley provide encouragement, but he also arranged for the publication of Newton's Principia Mathematica at his own expense. Without Halley's intervention, Newton's work might have remained unfinished or unpublished. The Principia became one of the most influential works in the history of science, and Halley's role in bringing it to light cannot be overstated. In 1720, Halley was appointed Astronomer Royal, a position that placed him at the center of British astronomy. He continued his observations of the moon and encouraged projects that aimed to determine the astronomical unit, the distance between the Earth and the Sun, through careful measurement of the transit of Venus. This idea, first suggested by Halley, inspired global expeditions in the 18th century that eventually yielded the first reasonably accurate measurement of the size of the solar system. Halley's final years were marked by continued activity even into his 80s. He conducted observations and maintained his interest in scientific matters. He died in the year 1742, leaving behind a legacy of daring ideas, rigorous observations, and contributions that touched many branches of science. His life illustrates the importance of both careful measurement and imaginative speculation. The comet that bears his name continues to appear in the sky roughly every 75 to 76 years, a reminder of the power of human reasoning to discern patterns in the cosmos. Reflecting on Halley's hollow earth theory, it is easy to dismiss it with the benefit of modern knowledge. Today, through seismic studies and modern physics, we know that the Earth is not hollow, but has a dense core surrounded by layers of mantle and crust. Yet Halley's willingness to propose the idea demonstrates the provisional nature of science. In his time, when so little was known about the planet's interior, Bold conjectures were necessary steps toward future understanding. Halley's attempt to connect magnetic observation with the structure of the Earth was, in fact, a forerunner of modern efforts to understand the geodynamo of mechanism by which the motion of molten iron in the Earth's outer core generates the magnetic field. Halley's life offers a striking lesson in the value of curiosity and imagination balanced by mathematical rigor. His prediction of the comet's return was not merely luck, but the result of applying Newton's theory with boldness. His hollow earth theory, though incorrect, reflected an attempt to account for real data with a coherent model. His support for Newton revealed his generosity and commitment to the advancement of knowledge beyond his own fame. Taken together, the story of Edmund Halley reveals the many sides of a man who helped shape the modern scientific worldview. He was an astronomer who looked to the heavens, a geophysicist who speculated about the Earth's depths, an explorer of the seas who designed diving equipment, and a friend who made sure one of the greatest books in science saw the light of day. His comment continues to mark the passage of time, appearing once in a human lifetime, and his ideas, whether right or wrong, continue to inspire reflection on the bold spirit of inquiry. All right. I know that I have got to, or I should say some stuff about this, but I also have another stream that I have to do, which is on the Praetorian. It's a simulcast for Censorship Sucks. I have been running late today, like I said before, and I wanted to get this in before I did that stream because after that I also have to do another stream after that. So this is going to be a busy night. Now, what I do want to say is these stories are the older versions or are more of the weird science from the history of science again. And the reason why I wanted to add those in was because they are very important when it comes to the history of science, especially when it comes to Halley. He was very important. And Petrus Peregrinus de Maricourt is a scientist who was known and is known by a lot of the intellectuals of his time period, but he didn't really become popular among just the average person during that time period because the things that he discussed wasn't really mainstream. People didn't start going to auditoriums to listen to scientists until the Age of Enlightenment, which was way, way after his time. So, um, a lot of people didn't know about him except for intellectual circles during that time period. So I was debating on putting him on my other show, The Cut, or bringing him over to Weird Science, and that was a really hard call for me. So eventually, what I decided was he belonged in the Weird Science category because it was just important to do that. That's just the way I felt about it. So I decided to do it. Hypatia is another one that could have been on the cut, but again, she contributed a lot, and she also kind of goes into the whole topic of electromagnetic or magnetic electromagnetism is the best way I can say it. I'm really bad with words, and I'm sorry for messing up on writing or reading. And I will someday, hopefully, be able to take care of that and make sure that it is taken care of. So I am checking the chat to see if anybody said anything. It looks like nobody has said anything, so maybe I can get lucky and get all of this taken care of, switch everything over, and get the live stream set up for my next show. I hope you guys did enjoy. I'd like to let everybody know that I am streaming on. I am streaming on Rumble, of course. I'm streaming on YouTube as well, and you can find us there at the Wonderful World of Weirdness on both Rumble and YouTube. Now, on YouTube, I also have another channel which I mentioned before, which is Strange Stories, where this will be downloaded, edited, and well, it'll be added on um, Strange Stories as 15-minute videos. Besides that, I will also be putting those 15-minute videos up again, edited on the Wonderful World of Weirdness and Rumble. So for YouTube and Rumble, um, and you'll get all of it on Rumble eventually because it's scheduled out. Um, Now, besides that, if you want to watch my streams, I am on Kick as oh my goodness, I've got to stop doing that crazy stuff. But yeah, but I am on Kick as well. At, I believe it's Roger underscore Hanson. Yes, and I'm also Roger underscore Hanson at DLive2, I believe. Um, tr- yes, I am at DLive. I'm Roger underscore Hanson as well. Besides that, you can find me on Twitch at Infamous 1969, and I believe I am. I've got that all covered, so I'm good to go. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, make comments, leave comments down in the comment section, not just in the chat, but in the comment section. Say hello. Don't have to say anything about the show. Just say hello and have a conversation with me. With that, I am going to end the stream, and I hope you guys have a good day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.